Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and redeemer. Amen. In the church calendar, today would normally be one of the Sundays of Pentecost. But the church calendar also has a number of different festivals that occur on certain days of the year. And it so happened, happily for me, that John the Baptist Day is today, Sunday. So we will pause from the series of texts about after Pentecost, pause today to look a little bit at John the Baptist. Now you may remember that before Christmas and Advent, there's a Sunday that's also dedicated to John the Baptist or his work. But today is really dedicated to the nativity of John the Baptist. So that's why you've heard the text, the three texts that we've just read, that all have to do with John the Baptist, but starting with this particular anecdote, his naming. What does a name mean? What does a name mean to you? What does your name mean to you? And how were you named? I think young families often expecting a first child and a second and a third and a fourth, every time they come to a decision somehow about what the name of that child will be. Now, in earlier days, like in our day, we didn't know whether it would be a boy or a girl. So we tried to agree on one name anyway for one, and if we couldn't agree on what the second would be, well, we'll wait until we have to decide which it is. So we have names that Cecilia and I chose that we didn't use. We had other names that we chose that we did use. But how do you choose? How do you choose names for a child? On what basis? Family? Meaning of the name? Sound?
Yeah, a nice name.
Sound of the name, a nice name.
Pronunciation. For us, it was important that the names were able to be pronounced both in Danish and in English with no problem.
Very important. How do you pronounce the name? And is it pronounceable where you are living?
My mother always liked Ruth in the Bible, and she made up her mind that's what she would call a girl. That's me.
So, Ruth, you were loved from the beginning by your mother, anticipated and waited for. And so we still love you as Ruth among us. So there are many different ways of selecting, choosing. Who does the choosing? Ruth said it was mother. Is it always mother, or is it father sometimes, or is it both? Both? Sandy says both? What if they don't agree?
Then the mother.
Then the mother. Okay, that's one way.
But there's always a middle name.
Yes.
Or there's a middle name, right. There's often, for us, there's a middle name. For Kenyans, and this gets to be a real problem sometimes there's only one name. And so when people would come through the Kenyan airport with a passport that had only one name, it was a real problem sometimes. That's my only name. Anyway, that's another condition, another situation. So there are others, of course, John and Johnson and all the sons. And then regarding activity, I had a colleague whose name was John, which is our name now, van der Jagd, of the hunt. His family was associated with hunting, and we have masons, and we have carvers, and we have etc. So lots of different ways of choosing a name. Now I think sometimes families that have come over, this was my own case, where my grandfather had come over, the first generation is probably given names that are local, new in the new country. Second generation and third may start to give names, at least as a second name, that goes back again to where they came from. Sometimes it's the father who gives the name to the pastor as they're standing around the baptismal font. So that can undercut the other decisions that they would make. Or it may be one of the in-laws, or grandma, or somebody who gives one name or another name, anyway. So as we put emphasis on choosing a name, on giving a name, Ruth reminds us that her name reminds her of her mother's choice. How do we live by our names? Do we try to live by our names? A name that has a beautiful sound. Certainly encourage the person who wears that sound, or carries that name, to somehow identify with something in that name, or maybe the people around. Do we think of our names daily, any day? Somebody asks, "Who are you?" Well, I'm so-and-so. What does that mean? Does it mean it's a biblical name from the Bible, therefore there's an association here with my faith, or at least the faith of my parents, where they came from? Well, that's our world. We had an interesting experience, my wife and I, not so long ago. You can use Google and you can use different ways to find different names now. Of course, you can do that early because very many parents know whether it'll be a boy or girl. So we recently had neighbors, friends who moved into the neighborhood. They hadn't been there very long, and then we saw one day outside on the mailbox there were two balloons, a pink and a blue one. And we thought, well, this looks like an announcement of a birth, a new, twins in the family. So my wife went about very carefully. She doesn't like some of the shopping stuff in big malls, but to look for something that would be appropriate here for a boy and a girl twin. So she wrapped them up carefully and took them over, and the young man was father, apparently, opened the door and wondered what this was about. Well, she was a little puzzled too about that kind of response. It seemed kind of uncertain, and so she explained, well, congratulations on the twins. Oh no, he said, we were just having a gender party. So this indicated that we knew now what the gender of the child would be, so we're having a party for our friends. So, well, we said, anyway, keep both the gifts. Well, John the Baptist, the story today, he's called the Baptist, but really it means the baptizing one. John was a baptizing one. And naming a child was important in Israel's day, and naming a child a certain way. So a boy would be named normally on the day of circumcision, which was the 8th day of the child's birth. This is the boy. Girls, there was no circumcision, obviously, so that was a little bit more flexible. They would name the girl at any time early in the life of the child. But so here, Elizabeth had given birth to this promised boy, and there was a problem, though, created by somebody outside interference, sort of, that Zechariah was not able to speak because of an event that had happened a little bit earlier. We didn't read that in our text, but I'll refer to it. And so the friends gathered around the community on this day to have now this formal religious, because circumcision was religious, was part of God's covenant for the people. And so the naming of the boy now would be according to family tradition. And normally the father would name the child be named after him. Except the father couldn't speak. And so the neighbors all got together and in the event then, informed the family that the boy's name will be Zechariah. Well, as you remember, something had happened earlier when the birth of the child was predicted by an angel to Zechariah. When Zechariah was serving in the temple because he was a priest, and the angel had told Zechariah the name of the boy, which wasn't Zechariah. And so Zechariah couldn't talk. He could maybe make gestures or something. But the mother spoke up and said, no, the name won't be Zechariah. It will be John. Well, what right did she have to interfere in the process that somehow was the responsibility of the whole community and Zechariah? And here she's telling them what the name of the boy is going to be. So, well, of course, she can say, well, my husband was off in the temple one day and an angel came and who would believe that? What kind of story could she tell really to convince them that the boy's name should be John? And so they said to her, in our reading, they said to her, none of your relatives has this name. Now, English is ambiguous there because you can be plural. And I think if we are reading it, we would normally think that this means Zechariah and Elizabeth, and none of your family on either side is named John. But in fact, it's singular. It's spoken directly to you. Mother, woman, none of your family, you, singular, is named John. So where and how can you bring that into this community? Well, then at that point, finally, they turn to Zechariah. And Zechariah asks for something to write on. He says, his name will be John. That's how we read it. Actually, it's much more forceful than that. What he writes is, John is his name, period. Categoric. It's not he will be named this or something, or his name will be John. No, John is his name. So that's John the Baptist. And his name, actually going back to what it means, it goes back to Hebrew, means, it's a name in a Hebrew form, also occurring in the Old Testament, that means God is gracious. So God has given a gift, and that gift is special. So that's what we were reading about in the additional, the two readings, first and second, that a messenger will be sent to announce the coming of good news. And that messenger is now carrying the name of John. So John's role as a messenger was announced in the prophecies of the Old Testament, recorded by Israel. But his identity was underscored here in his naming and was revealed in his name. This was important also to Paul, as we read in the Acts, the other reading, saying Paul was preaching in the synagogue in Antioch. Remember, Antioch was the place where followers of the way, followers of Christ, were first called Christians. And so here, Paul is invited into the synagogue, and in his sermon, he's giving them his message about Christ, and Christ who was announced by this messenger who called for the repentance of all Israel. So identity was very important, certainly to those around Zechariah and Elizabeth, in the naming of this little boy, John, who would carry on a unique message. It was important to Paul, preaching in the synagogue. He would often refer to himself in all his international travelings by one name or by one title or by another, but he always wanted to make it very clear who he was. So he also here refers back to John the baptizing one, whose call was to be a messenger announcing Christ and then calling for the repentance of all the people of Israel. So what identifies us in our name? How do we use our names? We refer to family. I'm the son of so-and-so. John was the son of Zechariah, but he didn't carry Zechariah's name. Some kind of special condition that was put on John the Baptist. I'm the son or daughter of so-and-so. In a city, we need official identification, a state ID, a driver's license. We can be asked for certainly when we're driving, or identification of one sort or another. When we travel, we need passports that give our names and that somebody in another country can verify, or that can be verified when we come to our own country here. And now, not only do they verify the passport in the picture there, they make you stand like this and take a picture to verify your face as well. Kind of a humiliating experience, but identifying you, who you are, is terribly important. What identifies us in our faith? I think we've often talked about that among us in our community, our church here. What identifies us as members of UELC? University, we say. But we're not all university people. That applies to some of us, but we're located across from the Gator football field. So that does somehow figure for university for us. We're evangelical, bearers of good news, of the message that John was announcing. And yet evangelical today has been taken away from us in the meaning that we give to it. So how do we identify evangelical that we are? Lutheran is a certain Protestant historical tradition, a certain history that we can be proud of, that we can try to follow, or that we can question, that we can bring together each other. We're a church, a religious organization of a certain type. John the baptizing one was called to a certain mission. How do we see the meaning of the names that we bear? The names that we bear given to us in baptism, in birth, on our birth certificates, or by association. How do we see those names being carried out in our daily lives? So as a prayer, may we be like John, each one of us in our own unique way, witnessing to God's graciousness to us in our daily lives.